Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Charles, and welcome you guys to another episode of the Dreamerspro Show, where we cover everything, related to sports topic, hot debates, and where we give you a perspective on sports and how we see it. And in today's episode, the topic is, will Clippers fans forgive Paul George after getting exposed in the playoffs? So that's the topic I want to get into in today's video. But before we get into that, please make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notification bell to be notified whenever we drop our content. And be sure to check out this show on the Dreamerspro Podcast, which we have linked in the description below. So let's just get straight into the content here, guys. So I think it's a pretty interesting topic, given the fact of what transpired in the playoffs this year in the Orlando bubble, and given the expectations that the Clippers had going into the season and into the playoffs. A lot of us picked the Clippers to win the title. I did, and many others did. However, they flaked out for a bunch of different reasons, but one of the main reasons for that was the performance or lack thereof of Paul George. Now, to be fair, a lot of Clippers fans have been saying that, listen, they don't believe Paul George is that guy, and other people in the media have said that. Kendrick Perkins, Skip Bayless calls him, Paul George Paul. So there are people out there that just didn't feel like he was that dude. However, some people said, okay, listen, no one is asking him to be that dude because now he's playing on a team with someone that's better than him. So all he needs to do is just be a great co-star, play his game. Don't worry about the pressure because someone else is going to be there to take the shots of the media if things go wrong. All you need to do is just essentially play a role. So you're playing with house money, you're not playing with too much pressure. Fine. Now let's go into the backstory of Paul George, okay? And before he came to play with the Clippers. Now, as you all know, Paul George is a six-time NBA All-Star. He's one of the best two-way players in the league. Last season, he was finished in the top 3 in MVP voting and Defensive Player of the Year. He's been on 2 All-First defensive teams, 2 second teams. So he's been on 4 defensive teams in his career. He won the Most Improved Player of the Year award in 2013, and he led the league in steals in 2019. So the guy was always a great player. Now, if you look at his numbers this season, the guy averaged 21.5 points, 5.7 rebounds, and 3.9 assists. Now, last season, the guy was averaging around 28 points a game, 6 or 7 rebounds, and 4 or 5 assists. So he was putting up much bigger numbers. Now, However, though, he didn't get, he got injured in the off season, and he needed to get shoulder surgery. So because of that, it caused him to miss training camp with the Clippers, which was sort of the beginning of their lack of chemistry issues that they had because he wasn't there. So he didn't have a training camp with them in Hawaii where they were. And he came back into the season late. I think he missed something like the first 10 or 15 games. And he was integrated into the lineup slowly. And he never really was able to get his legs under him because he was in and out of the lineup all throughout the regular season. Now, so that's what happened. But as the playoffs were getting closer in March, we had the lockdown, right? And because of the lockdown of the global pandemic, it put everything it caused everything to be halted pretty much all around the world. Business activity stopped. Everything stopped. School stopped and everything. And going into that lockdown, Paul George was nursing some injuries, some knick-knack injuries. But given the fact that the NBA had this sort of 4-month hiatus or 3 or 4 month hiatus, it allowed him to nurse all of his injuries, to really lick his wounds and really just, get himself ready. And when he came back into the bubble, when he came back and the season started and he went into the NBA bubble, he looked like a completely different player. He looked healthy. He was shooting something, I think, in those 8 bubble games, those 8 games on Orlando bubble. He was averaging something like 25.5 points a game and shooting 50% from the 3. 50% from the 3. And at that point, I said to myself, okay, it looks like the Clippers are going to get the guy that they spent all that money for. It looks like they're going to get the guy that they really mortgaged their future for. And I was feeling very, very optimistic about Paul George at that point because I said to myself, this guy looks like he's healthy. He's averaging over 25 points a game and shooting over 50% from the 3. And you guys saw him. He was sensational. But then the playoffs rolled around, and then things just started to go downhill. And it was one of the most perplexing things that I had ever witnessed in basketball. And this is the reason. The reason is this. Here's someone who played for 8 games in the same venue, in the same place, more or less, maybe in different arenas, given the different teams that were playing, fine. But essentially in the same place, right? Wasn't traveling to different locations, wasn't interacting with fans, wasn't, it wasn't like as if he was getting in and out of his day-to-day routine, nothing like that. Essentially in the same arenas. And as soon as the playoffs started, literally, as soon as the playoffs started, his performance began to drop. And it was one of the most perplexing things, because what I was asking myself is, what changed? What changed in the 8 games that you played in the Orlando bubble, and now the playoffs started, and now all of a sudden it's like all of his numbers began to drop. For the playoffs, Paul George averaged 20 points a game. He shot 39.8%, let's just say 40% from the field. He shot 33% from the 3-point line. His free throw percentage shooting was pretty good at 90%. And he got you 6.1 rebounds and 3.8. 3.8 assists and 1.5 steals. But if you look at his performance in the 8 games in the bubble, after being healthy, after having 4 months off to nurse his injuries, within like 3 days after the season ended, his points per scoring dropped by 5 points. His field goal percentage dropped. His 3-point percentage dropped by over 15 percentage points. And you ask yourself, what the hell is going on with this guy? And I think at that point, I began to understand, wait a minute, these people that were saying all of these things about Paul George might be right. For me, however, I couldn't conceptualize, because I'm saying to myself, what changed? What's the thing that's going to change to cause this guy to start performing poorly? And to me, to be quite honest with you, I still can't understand the reason why he was performing so poorly in the playoffs. Nevertheless, he had a abysmal showing in the playoffs for the Clippers, and in that Game 7, him and Kawhi Leonard were horrible. But at least Kawhi Leonard was more consistent all throughout the playoffs, and he averaged like 28 points a game. So you can't even compare the performances of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George in 2 completely different stratospheres if we're looking at the entirety of the playoffs. So that's what happened with PG. And Clippers fans were irate. NBA fans were befuddled. They were confounded by the performance that this guy put forward. And to add insult to injury, at the end of that series, after losing to the Denver Nuggets in 7 games, Paul George comes out and says, well, you know what? It wasn't championship or bust for this team, man. Next season we'll be back and we'll be fine. And that just sent people over the hill. And for me, I can understand why a lot of people felt that way, because that's just something you can't say. You can't go into the season after the Clippers gave up what they gave up, after forcing your way out of the contract with the Oklahoma City Thunder, coming to LA, walking around like you guys already won the championship, then you lose in the second round of the playoffs, and then you come out and say, oh, well, after all, it wasn't championship or bust this season. We'll be back next season. You just can't say that. And you wonder why so many people came down on you. So the question is, though, can he make up for what he did this playoffs, right? What if Paul George has a fantastic regular season this season? What if he performs exceptionally well next year? What if he comes back and he plays very well in the playoffs, and the Clippers are able to redeem themselves in the playoffs? Because I don't really see them being able to make too many moves. But what if he's able to do that and bounce back? Will he redeem himself in the eyes of Clippers fans? Really, that's the question I'm asking. And overall, do you think he'll redeem himself amongst general basketball fans to say, like, hey, listen, man, dude, you kind of just, you really flamed out in those playoffs and you kind of choked, but now you got my respect because you were able to really bounce back and make up for what we saw last season in the playoffs in the Orlando bubble. So that's the question really I'm trying to ask you guys. Do you think that Paul George can bounce back from this performance that he had? Yes, we know Kawhi had a bad Game 7, but Kawhi overall for the playoffs was pretty much carrying the damn team. Lou Williams scoring dropped by like 8 points. Montrezl Harrell Harold's scoring dropped by like 8 or 10 points. So Kawhi Leonard was the most consistent thing on that team. So many people are not going to come down on him. It's just that he picked the worst time to have his worst game probably in his career in the playoffs in that game 7, and it cost him the win. So that's what I want to know from you guys. Whatever you guys think, please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. And also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you check out more of our videos on our channel, because we cover different topics that we think a lot of you guys are going to enjoy. So be sure to check out some of our videos that you see being recommended to you, or you can just go to the channel and comb through our catalog and check out some of the videos that we got there. Once again, this is Charles here from Dreamerspro, wishing you guys an amazing day. Peace.